Cab cars are a fascinating type of rolling stock. They are essentially conventional passenger coaches, albeit with a driving cab at one end. As such, they allow a locomotive-hauled train to be driven equally well in both directions, all without having to uncouple the locomotive and run around the train at each end of the run. For more information about cab cars, I suggest watching Coasterfan 2105's video on the subject, to which I'll put a link in the top right corner. He goes into a lot more detail on how these things work, amongst other things. The concept of push-pull trains has actually been around for quite a long time. An early example of such a thing was the Great Western Railway Autocoaches. These things first appeared in 1904 and were developed from the steam rail motors. Heck, some of the autocoaches were even converted from old rail motors. Typically, autocoaches were used on rural branch lines, although they could still be seen on some mainline runs, such as Gloucester to Chalford. They were often used in conjunction with 4800 or 1400 class 042 tanks, of which 75 were built between 1932 and 1936. It's also worth giving a nod to the 5800 class. There were 20 of these things built, and they were identical to the 4800 class, apart from not being auto-fitted. It wasn't just the 4800/1400 class locomotives that ran with autocoaches. Sometimes the GWR would use other types of locomotives, such as the 5400 pannier tank or 4575 large prairie. Although not seen in this video, another example was the 6400 pannier tank. While cab cars are generally a common sight in the Northern Hemisphere, New Zealand has only ever had one, or by extension two, types of cab car. These were the SD/SRV stock, which were converted from old British Rail Mk2 coaches in the early 2000s. Starting around 2004, they were used in Auckland commuter services, where they ran in conjunction with either DC or DFB locomotives. The normal coaches were classified as SA. In total, there were 81 SA coaches and 23 SD cab cars, and they typically ran in 3 to 6 car formations, with 4 coaches being the most common. The SA and SD trains remained in service throughout most of Auckland until July 2015, when the AM class electric multiple units finally took over all services north of Papakura. Between July and September 2015, some DC locomotives kept running the Pukekohe shuttle with SA and SD stock. This was only a stopgap measure until enough drivers could be certified to drive the ADL diesel units. Following their displacement from Auckland commuter service, the SA and SD coaches were stored in Mount Maunganui and Taumarunui, although none of them are in Mount Maunganui anymore. More recently, 3 SD and 9 SA coaches have been re-refurbished at KiwiRail's Hut workshops and reclassified as SRV, formerly SD, or SR and SRC, formerly SA. These re-refurbished coaches are now used on Te Huia, a passenger service that started running in April 2021. It runs from Hamilton's Frankton station to Auckland's Strand station, while the motive power is provided by 3 of KiwiRail's DFB locomotives, namely 7077, 7295, and 7335. Something I haven't mentioned yet is that in addition to receiving a driver's cab, the SDs were also equipped with diesel generator sets, which were used to power heating and lighting in the coaches. While the SDs did retain their cabs during conversion to SRV specifications, the driver is generally only in the cab car for empty stock movements between Frankton Station and Te Rapa Yard. Due to safety concerns relating to the numerous level crossings north of Hamilton, the SRV cab cars aren't actually allowed to lead Te Huia trains in passenger service. we have some cab cars that Dovetail Games have added to Train Sim World, starting with the Nippon Sharyo gallery cars and their Caltrain guys. These things were first built in 1985, and are still in service on the Peninsula Corridor today, although in real life Caltrain are working on electrifying their line and replacing all of their diesel locomotives and the old coaches with the Stadler KISS electric multiple units. The gallery cars are typically used in conjunction with EMD F40PH-2 CAT diesel locomotives, as seen here in San Jose. There's also the ubiquitous Bombardier bilevel cars, which to me have always looked like elongated octagons. The first examples of this type were built for Go Transit in 1976, and they have since become a very common sight on commuter railroads in the USA and Canada. Caltrain has at least 41 bilevel cars on their roster, some of them are actually ex-Metrolink, and they're typically used on either limited stop or baby bullet services between San Francisco and Gilroy. Motive power is provided by the MPI MP36PH-3C diesel locomotives. Next we come to the, in my opinion, unusual looking CTC3 cab cars, used by the Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority. 96 of these things were built by Messerschmitt Baukow Blohm in 1987 and 1988. In TSW2, they can be seen on the Boston Sprinter route, running in conjunction with BTC3 cars and MPI F40PH-3C diesel locomotives. The F40s are always at the southern end, with the cab car always at the northern end, just like Caltrain. Next up are the Doppelstockwagen coaches, which can be found on several regional and some S-Bahn services throughout Germany. More specifically, the ones we have in TSW are the fourth generation of the Bombardier double-deck coach, and were first built in 1997. If my research is correct, Deutsche Bahn have well over 100 Doppelstockwagen coaches in use throughout the country, and the two variants in TSW are the 766 and 767. You'll find them on most German routes in the game, such as Ruhrsieg Nord and Main-Spessartbahn, where they run with either the DB BR143, BR146-2, or BR182 electric locomotives. Meanwhile, in the United Kingdom, push-pull trains continue to have their uses on some long-distance and intercity services. One such example is the East Coast Main Line, which has seen Class 91 electric locomotives running with Mk4 coaches and driving van trailers since the early 1990s. Some of them are still in service today, but they're now outnumbered by the Hitachi-built Class 800 and 801 units. The DVT is sort of like a normal cab car, except it has a huge luggage compartment instead of any passenger accommodation. The last example of a push-pull train we'll look at today is formed of a Class 86 electric locomotive with some Mk2 coaches and a DBSO, short for Driving Brake Standard Open. These were used on London to Norwich services between the late 1980s and the mid-2000s. British Rail converted 10 Mk2 coaches into DBSOs in 1979, with another 4 being converted in 1985 and 1986. They were originally used in push-pull service with Class 47 diesels between Glasgow and Edinburgh in Scotland. In real life, Network Rail still has 5 DBSOs in active service, while 2 are preserved, one of those survivors being in Northern Ireland, and the remainder have either been put in storage or scrapped. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this somewhat experimental video. It's not often I come up with ways to incorporate real train footage into the same video as clips from Train Simulator and TSW, so feel free to let me know what you think of this lot. Take care everyone, and I'll see you next time.